morning, viewers. I hope you're fine wherever you are. Welcome to Talk to Africa. My name is George. Yesterday, we looked at the fears Kenyans have on a William Samoei Ruto presidency. Today, we'll look at the fears Kenyans have on a Raila Odinga presidency. What are the fears that you have on a Raila Odinga presidency? If you're watching this channel for the first time, kindly join our club by subscribing. And if you particularly like any of our programs, we would be appreciate if you like the programs that you like. And even then, you can add a little comment on the topic that we are talking about. Similarly, don't forget to ring the notification bell down there so that whenever we produce this kind of programs, YouTube will automatically notify you. What do you fear most about a Raila Odinga presidency? Kenyans fear Raila Odinga's presidency for certain reasons. Number one is the fear of the unknown. Let me call it that way. This, I would say in a better phrase, is the fear of uncertainty. Like, for a long time now, Raila Odinga has been sold negatively in especially the Mount Kenya area, where all sorts of things were said about this particular leader or presidential candidate. So there's that fear of uncertainty in the sense that how will this man treat us? And I'm talking here about those guys or the voters, Kenyan voters in Mount Kenya. There's that area, that uncertainty, a problem regarding Raila Odinga. I say the fear of the unknown because you can't pinpoint it. You can't pinpoint and say this is the exact fear. So that is by and large the fear of uncertainty or the fear of the unknown. So the other fear that Raila Odinga had, and I say had because he's actually proven lately that he's almost overcoming that fear, is the fear that Raila Odinga is not a Christian or was not a Christian. For a long time, people peddled the rumor or peddled issues, maneno, as in Raila Odinga is not a Christian, believes in witchcraft and all this, some of which I think you've heard, even from his competitor. So that fear, I would say, to a large extent now, he's been able to address it. They say action speaks louder than words. He's been able to go to churches. He's been able to address that issue, but he still needs to confront it and address it directly, by actually stating it as a fact. So there's that fear that Raila Odinga is not a Christian and ni mganga or whatnot. Those issues are there. There's another fear of Raila Odinga for those people who basically still are within that mountain area. Raila Odinga is feared because he has this kind of opposition DNA, in the sense that, for a while, even in the Grand Coalition government, he's been in the opposition and he's only identified with the opposition. Raila Odinga, despite the fact that he spent 5 years as Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, Raila Odinga is mainly identified with opposition, with, and where I mean destruction, riots, that kind of thing, the kind of combative opposition politics. And that is something that Raila Amolo Odinga needs to address, because it's a fact that there was a time, of course, he was in the streets with many other people, but he's carried the brand of it. So that is something that Raila Amolo Odinga really, really needs to look at and address. As in, you can have an opposition, but still have government continue its deliberations, because taxpayers don't stop when there are riots. So that is a fear that Raila Amolo Odinga has to address. Now, this other fear that people have of Raila Amolo Odinga is basically the burden, the burden of the community where he comes from. There's that fear of that community. There's that fear that, serikali itakojoa barabarani, you don't say that arrogance or perceived, let me say, perceived arrogance of the Luo community. So Raila carries a burden of his community as something that he needs to address. And by the way, he not only needs to address that as people fear for the purposes of his image, but he also needs to manage the expectations of his community members. And here I'll be specific. I'm not talking about the community in the periphery. I'm not talking about Siaya or maybe South Nyanza, Homa Bay area, or maybe, the community that lives around Busia. Yeah. I'm talking about specifically this community in Kisumu, especially, where it's like a hotbed of politics. He has to manage his people and their expectations and that perception of arrogance and know it all. That is a burden that Raila is carrying in his presidential bid that he really needs to address. So that is tied to the community where Raila Amolo Odinga comes from. There's also the fear by middle class investors, landlords, landladies, especially in Nairobi area, and some of these areas where basically people rent houses and live in those particular houses. And by the way, it's a perception, because not all the houses that are rented by Raila Amolo Odinga guys or people from his community belong to people from Mount Kenya. There are also people who have houses and don't come from Mount Kenya. So there's this fear about Raila Amolo Odinga's presidency, that when he comes into power, that people will rebel to pay rents, especially in Nairobi, Kibera area, or Kibra, Mathare, Kayole, there's that thing. It's perceived, because I'm not saying that, it's not there. The fear is real. The fear is there. And Raila Amolo Odinga has to kind of address that fear, that when he becomes president, or he becomes the fifth president of the Republic of Kenya, that people will refuse, especially people from his own community, will refuse to pay rent. That is something that really, in my view, is neither here nor there, but it's a fear that people have of Raila Amolo Odinga. Some Kenyans fear Raila Amolo Odinga presidency because of trust issues. like they quite don't trust him, right? They quite don't trust him. But I'm talking about particularly people and my friends from Mount Kenya. I had covered it in terms of fear of the unknown, but maybe let me expound a little bit. Is that issue like they're not sure or have trust in Raila Odinga as a person? you know I'm not going to justify, it's up to him to deal with it, but this could have been as a result of the long-term kind of view or perception or kind of picture or image that has been made by some people or leaders for their own benefit, especially again in Mount Kenya area, that trust issue. Now, there are some fears, you'll be surprised, that Kenyans from Raila Amolo Odinga's area itself have. Yeah, welcome to the political world. Yes, those are fears like he only concentrates within his family. People fear that only his family will benefit from whatever he has. And these are legitimate fears of people from his own community, that he's not philanthropic or generous, or he doesn't want to give resources or allow other people from within his own community to participate in his government or in his let me say achievements. So there's that fear that people have, that when appointment comes, or time comes for appointments, that those appointments will only go to members of his own family or the bigger family and friends. Those are fears that people have of Raila Amolo Odinga. There are those people too who fear about the people Raila Amolo Odinga surrounds him, the politicians, let me say, Raila Amolo Odinga surrounds himself with, the Nyong'os, the Who's, those inner circle of politicians, especially from his own community, who surround him. And, they give him a certain image. And that's a problem. But they don't outright campaign for him positively as such, but they bring out that fear, of a club of politicians or people who basically, have the ear to Raila Amolo Odinga. And when you get to him, maybe you will have to be in good graces of other politicians or Luo politicians who come from his community. That's a fear, yeah, and he has to address it. There's the fear of democratic space. Like a lot of people think that the ODM as a party is not a democratic party. And this fear of actually some kind of high-handedness, let me say, not exactly, I can't quite get the right word there, but there's that fear that of the fact or the thinking that Raila Amolo Odinga presidency will not have a lot of democratic space, especially, again, like I said, in his own basis. Because when you look at Raila Amolo Odinga out there, he's very generous. Like in 2007, and I'm not talking about good things, I'm just trying to make a point here. In 2007, most people who actually went with his campaign when he became prime minister were from other communities, Northeastern, cost, and so there's that fear of democratic space, and that has been associated with the ODM party. I don't know, but there's that fear of that little bubble of democratic space within his own the area where he has a lot of support, especially uh, the lake region. It's a given fact in this country that corruption an industry, is an industry. And one way or another, people are involved actively in that industry of corruption and bribery, starting from cops, starting to what. There's that fear. There's that fear that he will come and end corruption. So Raila Odinga has to address that. Because what are these people fearing? Are they fearing persecution or prosecution in court? Are they fearing the fact that they will not have that income that comes from corruption or bribery and everything? Those are fears that he has to address. And if it's a question of or prosecution, then those are fears that have to be there. If it's a question of losing that particular income, then those are fears that Raila Odinga has to address. And actually, even then, for both candidates, and actually come up with a solution to the issue of corruption in Kenya. That is a fear that Raila Odinga will end that industry and close it. So if you are closing one industry, then certainly you have to open another one. Other fear is actually the fear of policy. What is Raila Odinga's economic policies? That fear is there, as in terms of what kind of policies does it come with that will allow the private sector to thrive? That is a factor that people actually have, and that is a fear that Raila Odinga has to address. Let me give you an example. Like when you talk about 6,000 shillings, particularly the socialist kind of setup, where government is actually paying the unemployed, for instance. He hasn't said that, but he's talked about the poor families. Those programs that are actually being done in the West, believe it or not, they are, even in the US, where you have some unemployment benefits. The private sector people think that that will take away their profits in one way or another. And even some of the programs that even President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta has started, like the affordable housing programs, there are some people too who fear that. Investors who fear that when you have affordable housing, their houses will not be rented and things like that. So something to do with the economy. And those are fears that Raila Odinga in his campaign or somewhere along the line has to address so that he can actually put the right picture, because you can have those social programs continuing and still have a very vibrant private sector. It's a question of just putting your ducks in a row. The last one for me, I would say, from what I gather, is the fear, especially from his own community, that, he will basically take away or buy out, the land that is available, and not allow other people to buy them out, as in terms of ownership. He's not taking them away for free, but the fact that land is a scarce resource, and that element of having one person, maybe his where he comes from, take buy quite a chunk of land in his own community. It's a fear, and that he has to address. Yeah, there's that fear from within his own community and even outside that, those who buy into Raila Amolo Odinga don't allow space for those who don't buy. buy into Raila Amolo Odinga, to the extent that it can even then be perceived to turn violent. So there's that fear, and that expression, that thing has to come from Raila Amolo Odinga himself. He has a fear that Raila Amolo Odinga has to address. What are your fears? What do you fear about a Raila Amolo Odinga presidency? Thank you very much for tuning in.